Marcus Chun had always been a quiet man, the kind who preferred the company of his dog over most people. After losing his wife Sarah in the mining accident on Kepler Station 3 years ago, he'd retreated to the Outer Rim territories with only Rex, his faithful German Shepherd mix, as his companion. They made their living salvaging derelict spacecraft in the debris fields of the Tau Ceti system, where the Great War between humans and the Zephyrian Empire had left countless wrecks floating in the void. The salvage business wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Marcus would pilot his modified cargo hauler, the Sarah's Dream, through the twisted metal graveyards while Rex sat in the co-pilot's seat, his intelligent brown eyes watching the scanner displays as if he understood every blip and signal. In many ways, Rex was Marcus's early warning system. The dog had an uncanny ability to sense danger before the ship's sensors could detect it, often growling or whining minutes before pirates or automated defense systems would activate. On the morning everything changed, Marcus and Rex were investigating a partially intact Zephyrian battlecruiser that had been drifting for nearly a decade. The massive ship was a treasure trove of rare metals and advanced technology, the kind of find that could set them up for years. Rex had been unusually calm during the approach, his tail even wagging slightly as they docked with the alien vessel's cargo bay. The battlecruiser's corridors were dark and cold, filled with the metallic scent of long-dead atmosphere recyclers. Marcus wore his environmental suit while Rex padded alongside him in his specially designed canine space gear, complete with oxygen recycler and magnetic paws for zero-gravity movement. They developed a perfect system over the years. Rex would scout ahead, his enhanced senses detecting anything dangerous, while Marcus followed with the cutting tools and cargo haulers. They'd been working for 3 hours, carefully extracting valuable components from the ship's engineering section, when Rex suddenly stopped and growled low in his throat. His hackles rose beneath his suit, and he backed toward Marcus, pressing against his leg in a way that meant immediate danger. Marcus checked his scanner, but it showed nothing unusual. Then he heard it too, the subtle vibration through the deck plating that meant engines were powering up. The Zephyrian patrol ship materialized out of stealth mode, just as Marcus and Rex reached their airlock. It was sleek and predatory, painted in the deep purple and silver of the Zephyrian Navy. Through his helmet radio, Marcus heard the cold, electronically modulated voice that had haunted human nightmares for decades. Human vessel, this is Commander Vexhai of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. You are illegally salvaging in a protected war memorial site. Prepare to be boarded for inspection and judgment. Marcus's hands moved automatically to his ship's controls, but he knew it was pointless. The Zephyrians had faster ships, better weapons, and absolutely no regard for human life. During the war, they'd been known to execute entire crews for minor infractions, claiming it was necessary to maintain order among the lesser species. The ceasefire had been in effect for 5 years now, but encounters like this proved it was fragile at best. The boarding tube connected with a metallic clang that resonated through the Sarah's Dream's hull. Marcus sealed Rex in the emergency shelter he'd built behind the engine room, a hidden compartment that would protect his companion from radiation or decompression. Rex whined and scratched at the door, sensing his human's fear, but Marcus had no choice. The Zephyrians considered most Earth animals to be vermin, and Rex would be killed on sight if they discovered him. "Stay quiet, boy," Marcus whispered through the shelter's comm system. "I'll be back for you. I promise." 3 Zephyrians entered his ship, their elongated forms moving with predatory grace. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and chitinous purple-black skin that seemed to absorb light. Their faces were angular and cruel, with large black eyes that reflected no mercy or compassion. Commander Vexhai wore the silver insignia of his rank, while his 2 subordinates carried energy weapons that could vaporize a human in seconds. "You were warned about salvaging in memorial sites," Vexhai said, his translator rendering his clicks and hisses into cold English. The penalty for desecration of Zephyrian war graves is severe. Marcus tried to explain that the battlecruiser had been listed as abandoned salvage in the neutral zone treaties, but the aliens weren't interested in his legal arguments. They'd clearly decided his fate before boarding. What followed was a systematic looting of everything valuable on his ship: his tools, his credits, his personal belongings, even Sarah's wedding ring that he wore on a chain around his neck. Then, one of the subordinates detected something with the scanner and chittered excitedly to the commander. Vexai's large eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. Life sign, mammalian. You're harboring vermin, human. Marcus's blood turned to ice. It's just my dog. He's harmless, completely domesticated. Please, he's all I have left. But the Zephyrians were already moving toward the engine room, following their scanners to the hidden shelter. Marcus lunged forward desperately, only to be stunned by an energy weapon that sent paralyzing electricity through his nervous system. He collapsed to the deck, helpless, as they found Rex's hiding place. Rex had been trained never to attack unless Marcus gave the command, but when the aliens dragged his human's unconscious body toward their ship, something primal awakened in the dog's genetic memory. He launched himself at the nearest Zephyrian with a snarl that echoed through the corridors, his teeth finding the soft joint between the alien's neck and shoulder. The creature screamed and dropped its weapon, purple blood spraying across the deck. The other Zephyrian shot Rex without hesitation. The energy beam caught him mid-leap, and he crashed to the floor with a pitiful whine. Marcus, still paralyzed but conscious, could only watch as his best friend struggled to breathe, his brown eyes finding his human's face one last time before the light faded from them. Disgusting creature, Vexai said, crushing Rex's body under his boot. At least it died with some spirit, more than most of your species can claim. They dragged Marcus to their ship and threw him into a detention cell barely large enough for a human to stand upright. Through the small viewport, he watched as they set charges on the Sarah's Dream and destroyed it, along with Rex's body. The explosion lit up the dark space around the Zephyrian battlecruiser like a brief, tragic star. As a patrol ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying him toward an uncertain fate in Zephyrian space, Marcus Chun felt something die inside him that wasn't just grief. The quiet man who'd preferred solitude and simple work was gone, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. They'd taken everything from him twice now. First Sarah, now Rex. There was nothing left to lose, which meant there was nothing to hold him back from what he was going to do. In the months that followed, Marcus would escape from the labor camp on Zephyria Prime. He would steal weapons and ships, gather allies and intelligence, and begin a campaign of revenge that would shake the foundations of the Zephyrian Empire. But in that moment, sitting in the dark cell with his hands still smelling like Rex's fur, he simply sat and planned. The Zephyrians had made a fatal mistake in underestimating both human determination and the bond between a man and his dog. They'd killed Rex thinking he was just an animal, not understanding that dogs have been humanity's partners for over 30,000 years. They were part of what made humans dangerous, loyal, brave, and utterly devoted to those they loved. By destroying that bond, the Zephyrians hadn't just murdered a pet. They declared war on everything that made humanity worth preserving. And Marcus Chun was going to make them pay for every second of Rex's suffering. The labor camp on Zephyria Prime was designed to break spirits before it broke bodies. Humans, along with several other lesser species, were forced to mine crystalline formations deep beneath the planet's purple-tinged surface. The crystals were used in Zephyrian weapons and shield technology, making the prisoners unwilling contributors to their own oppression. Most humans lasted 6 months before the combination of toxic atmosphere, brutal working conditions, and systematic abuse killed them. Marcus had been there for 8 months, and he was not only alive but growing stronger. The other prisoners whispered that he was either insane or possessed by some dark spirit. He worked with mechanical precision, never speaking unless spoken to, never complaining about the meager rations or the casual violence of the guards. His eyes had become cold and distant, focused on something beyond the immediate hell of their existence. What they didn't know was that Marcus spent every waking moment planning. He memorized guard rotations, studied the facility's layout, and carefully cataloged every piece of equipment that could be weaponized. He learned rudimentary Zephyrian by listening to their conversations, discovering that their language was far more complex and nuanced than their translators revealed. Most importantly, he began to understand their psychology. The Zephyrians were apex predators on their homeworld, descended from pack hunters who dominated their planet's ecosystem for millions of years. They viewed other species through this lens. Everything was either prey, rival predators, or useful tools. Humans had been classified as tools during the war, valuable for their dexterity and problem-solving abilities, but ultimately expendable. This fundamental misunderstanding of human nature would be their downfall. Marcus's opportunity came during the shift change at the end of Zephyria Prime's long day cycle. A new guard named HFY had been tormenting the human prisoners, apparently trying to impress his superiors with his cruelty. He'd taken a particular interest in an elderly human named Dr. Elena Vasquez, a former xenobiologist who'd been captured while studying Zephyrian wildlife in the neutral zones. HFY would force Dr. Vasquez to perform degrading tasks, making her crawl through the mining tunnels on hands and knees while he shocked her with his control prod. The other guards found this amusing, as did some of the more sadistic prisoners from other species. But Marcus watched with the patience of a hunter, waiting for the perfect moment. That moment came when HFY decided to demonstrate his authority by forcing Dr. Vasquez to eat the mineral-contaminated waste that passed for food in the camp. As she knelt in the dirt, tears streaming down her weathered face, Marcus made his move. His years of salvage work had given him intimate knowledge of Zephyrian technology, including the weak point in their personal armor where the neck joined the torso. Marcus moved with a speed that caught everyone by surprise. His improvised weapon, a sharpened piece of crystal he'd been hiding for weeks, found its mark with surgical precision. HFY's four arms flailed wildly as purple blood sprayed across the compound. But Marcus was already moving, claiming the guards' weapons and using them to eliminate the other two guards before they could sound an alarm. The prison break that followed was swift and brutal. Marcus had identified 12 other prisoners with military or technical backgrounds, humans and aliens alike, who shared his hatred of their captors. Working together, they seized the compound's communication center and weapons depot before the main garrison could respond. But Marcus wasn't interested in simply escaping. He had a larger plan in mind. Using his newfound understanding of Zephyrian technology and military protocols, Marcus sent a false distress signal claiming that the mining operation had discovered a massive vein of rare crystals that required immediate military protection. The response was everything he'd hoped for: a heavy cruiser with a full battalion of Zephyrian troops, thinking they were responding to a valuable discovery rather than a trap. The ambush Marcus orchestrated in the asteroid field near Zephyria Prime became legendary among human resistance cells. Using the mining equipment as improvised weapons and explosives, his small force of escaped prisoners managed to destroy or capture 3 Zephyrian warships, including the heavy cruiser Imperious Claw. More importantly, they captured hundreds of Zephyrian military personnel alive. What happened next shocked both the Zephyrian Empire and human space. Marcus didn't execute his prisoners or torture them for information. Instead, he treated them with the same casual cruelty they'd shown to other species, making them perform degrading tasks while he studied their psychology and culture. He was particularly interested in their pack mentality and the way their honor-based society functioned. Through careful observation and experimentation, Marcus discovered something the human military had never realized during the war. Zephyrian society was built around rigid hierarchies maintained through constant displays of dominance and submission. When a Zephyrian's position in the hierarchy was threatened, They would either fight to maintain it or submit completely to the superior predator. There was no middle ground. Marcus began systematically breaking down the command structure of his prisoners, using their own cultural programming against them. He would force high-ranking officers to serve lower-ranking soldiers, creating cognitive dissonance that shattered their understanding of the natural order. Within weeks, he had several Zephyrian officers who were completely loyal to him, viewing him as a superior predator worthy of their service. News of Marcus's victories spread throughout human space like wildfire. The mysterious figure who called himself Rex, in honor of his murdered companion, became a symbol of human resistance. Recruitment for his growing fleet skyrocketed as humans who'd lost everything to the Zephyrians flocked to his banner. But Marcus wasn't building an army for conquest. He was preparing for something far more ambitious. Using intelligence gathered from his converted Zephyrian officers, Marcus learned about a secret research facility called the Genesis Project. Located in a hidden system beyond Zephyrian space, the facility was developing biological weapons designed to target specific species while leaving Zephyrians unharmed. The research included detailed studies of human genetics, psychology, and social structures, all with the goal of creating the perfect weapon to eliminate humanity entirely. The facility was also where they kept specimens of various alien species for testing, including several hundred dogs taken from human colonies during the war. The Zephyrians considered these animals to be ideal test subjects because of their genetic similarity to humans and their emotional bond with their owners. They were being used to develop psychological warfare techniques that would break human morale by targeting the species humans cared about most. When Marcus learned that Rex might not have been the only dog to suffer at Zephyrian hands, something fundamental shifted in his campaign. What had begun as personal revenge evolved into something larger and more dangerous. He began reaching out to other species that had suffered under Zephyrian oppression, offering them alliance, and sharing his techniques for breaking Zephyrian psychology. The Coalition of the Forgotten, as they called themselves, became a force that the Zephyrian Empire could no longer ignore. Marcus's fleet grew to include ships from dozens of species, all united by their hatred of Zephyrian cruelty and their belief in Marcus's vision of justice. But the true test of their resolve would come when they attempted to assault the Genesis Project facility. As Marcus stood on the bridge of his captured flagship, the former Imperious Claw, now renamed the Rex's Revenge, he studied the tactical displays showing the heavily fortified research station. His Zephyrian officers stood at their posts, their loyalty absolute, while his human crew prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives. In the ship's main hangar, Coalition forces from a dozen different species checked their weapons and equipment. The attack would not just be about rescuing the prisoners or destroying the biological weapons research. It would be about sending a message that would resonate throughout both human and Zephyrian space. The era of casual cruelty and species-based oppression was ending, and Marcus Chun was the instrument of that change. But first, he had a promise to keep to a faithful German shepherd who died protecting the human he loved. Every Zephyrian who'd been involved in Rex's death would pay the price, and their entire species would learn why humans and dogs have been partners for 30,000 years. The hunt was about to begin in earnest. The Genesis Project facility hung in the void like a mechanical spider, its 8 research arms extending from a central hub that pulsed with ominous energy. Each arm was the size of a small city, containing laboratories holding cells and testing chambers where the Zephyrian Empire conducted its most horrific experiments. The facility was protected by a fleet of automated defense platforms and patrol ships, all controlled by an artificial intelligence that had been programmed with the cold logic of Zephyrian military doctrine. Marcus studied the tactical displays aboard Rex's Revenge, his converted Zephyrian officers providing detailed intelligence about the facility's defenses. Commander Vexhai, the same alien who'd murdered Rex, was now the facility's security chief, having been promoted after his successful elimination of human smugglers in the Outer Rim territories. The irony was not lost on Marcus that his greatest enemy was now exactly where he wanted him. The coalition fleet that Marcus had assembled was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships retrofitted with captured Zephyrian technology flew alongside vessels from the Kepler Collective, the Tau Ceti mining consortium, and dozens of other species that had suffered under Zephyrian oppression. Each ship carried crews that had lost everything to the Empire's cruelty, united by their shared hatred and Marcus's promise of justice. But the most unusual members of Marcus's coalition were the Zephyrians themselves. Nearly 200 former Imperial officers and soldiers now served under the human they'd come to see as the ultimate apex predator. Their conversion hadn't been achieved through torture or brainwashing, but through Marcus's deep understanding of their psychology. He'd proven himself superior to them in every way that mattered to their culture, earning their loyalty through displays of tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency. The attack began with a coordinated assault on the facility's outer defenses. Marcus had learned from studying Zephyrian military history that they relied heavily on overwhelming firepower and technological superiority, but they were vulnerable to unconventional tactics. Instead of a direct assault, he used a strategy that played to humanity's greatest strength, adaptability. Coalition ships scattered throughout the system, using hit-and-run tactics to confuse the automated defense systems. Meanwhile, Marcus's converted Zephyrian officers transmitted false orders to the facility's AI, creating gaps in the defensive grid that allowed human infiltration teams to slip through. The Zephyrians had never imagined that their own people would turn against them, so their security protocols had no defense against internal sabotage. Marcus himself led the infiltration of the central hub, accompanied by a strike team that included Dr. Elena Vasquez, whom he'd rescued from the labor camp, and Kralthek, a former Zephyrian naval commander who now served as Marcus's tactical advisor. Their target was the facility's main laboratory, where the biological weapons research was being conducted. What they found in the laboratory specimen holding areas defied even Marcus's worst expectations. Hundreds of creatures from across the galaxy were being held in containment cells, subjected to experiments that were both scientifically pointless and deliberately cruel. The Zephyrians weren't just developing weapons. They were indulging their sadistic nature on a massive scale. In Section 7 of the specimen areas, Marcus found what he'd been looking for. 38 dogs of various breeds, all taken from human colonies during the war, were being kept in individual cells that barely allowed them to stand. Most showed signs of extensive medical experimentation, their fur patchy from surgical scars, and their eyes dull with trauma. But when Marcus approached their cages, several of them managed to wag their tails, their innate trust in humans still intact despite years of abuse. Dr. Vasquez wept openly as she examined the animals, her xenobiological training allowing her to understand the full scope of what had been done to them. "They've been using them to test psychological warfare techniques," she reported, her voice shaking with rage. "Trying to understand the human-canine bond, so they could weaponize it. The monsters were planning to use dogs as biological weapons against human populations." Marcus knelt before one cage containing an old golden retriever whose right leg had been amputated for some unknown experiment. The dog looked up at him with eyes that reflected both pain and hope, and Marcus was suddenly transported back to that terrible moment when he'd watched Rex die. His hands trembled as he opened the cage, and the dog immediately tried to nuzzle his face despite its injuries. "I'm sorry we took so long to find you," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking with emotion he'd kept buried for months. "But we're here now, and they're going to pay for what they did to all of you." The evacuation of the specimen areas became a military operation unlike any other in galactic history. Marcus's forces didn't just rescue the dogs. They liberated every creature being held in the facility, from Kepler songbirds to massive Andromedan pack hunters. Each rescued animal became a symbol of resistance against Zephyrian cruelty, and Their liberation sent shockwaves throughout both the Empire and the Coalition territories. But Marcus wasn't finished. While his teams evacuated the specimens, he made his way to the facility's command center, where Commander Vexhai was desperately trying to coordinate the defense. The Zephyrian who'd murdered Rex was exactly as Marcus remembered, tall, arrogant, and completely convinced of his own superiority. When Marcus entered the command center with his weapon drawn, Vexhai's first reaction was contemptuous laughter. The salvage human, Vexhai clicked, his translator rendering the words with mechanical precision. Come to rescue your precious vermin? You're too late. The specimens have served their purpose. Soon we'll have weapons that will break human morale completely. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he activated a device Dr. Vasquez had prepared using captured Zephyrian biotechnology. The device released pheromones that triggered the deepest fear responses in Zephyrian brain chemistry, chemicals that their species produced when facing a superior predator. Within seconds, Vexhai and his staff were trembling uncontrollably, their instinctive terror overriding their rational minds. Do you know what you did wrong? Marcus asked calmly, watching as the aliens cowered before him. You thought dogs were just animals. But they're not animals to us. They're family. They're partners. They're the best parts of humanity made manifest. When you killed my dog, you didn't just murder a pet. You murdered my family. What followed was not an execution, but a demonstration. Marcus had learned that Zephyrian society only understood dominance and submission, so he gave them a lesson they would never forget. Using techniques he developed from studying their psychology, he systematically broke down Vexhai's identity as a superior predator, forcing him to acknowledge Marcus as the apex being in the room. By the time Marcus was finished, Vexhai was prostrated on the floor, clicking and chittering in the Zephyrian equivalent of a submission posture. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with simple surrender. He activated the facility's communication system, broadcasting his message to every Zephyrian installation in the sector. I am Marcus, Chun, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd conquered fear itself. You know me as Rex, named for a faithful dog you murdered without cause. Today you've learned that humans are not the tools you believed us to be. We are predators, and we've been hunting in packs with loyal companions for 30,000 years. This facility and everyone in it now belongs to the Coalition of the Forgotten. Any Zephyrian ship that approaches will be destroyed without warning. The message sent shockwaves throughout Zephyrian space. For the first time in their recorded history, a member of what they considered a lesser species had not only defeated them in direct combat, but had humiliated their warriors in a way that challenged the fundamental assumptions of their society. The Genesis Project facility became a symbol of human determination and the power of the human-animal bond. In the weeks that followed, Marcus used the captured facility as a base of operations for increasingly bold strikes against Zephyrian targets. But, more importantly, he turned it into a rehabilitation center for the rescued animals and a training facility where other species could learn the psychological techniques he developed for dealing with Zephyrian psychology. The old golden retriever, whom Dr. Vasquez had named Hope, became Marcus's constant companion. Despite her injuries and trauma, she displayed the same loyalty and courage that had made Rex such a perfect partner. Together with the other rescued dogs, she became living proof that the bond between humans and their animal companions was unbreakable, even in the face of systematic cruelty. As Marcus stood in the facility's observation deck, watching Coalition ships arriving with more rescued prisoners and liberated worlds, he felt something he hadn't experienced since Rex's death, a sense of purpose that went beyond revenge. The war was far from over, but they'd proven something important. Humanity wasn't just another species to be dominated or destroyed. There was something far more dangerous, pack hunters who'd learned to make allies of their prey and turn enemies into loyal companions. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn why humans had spent 30,000 years becoming the galaxy's most successful predators, and why the bond between a human and their dog was the most dangerous force in the universe. The Zephyrian High Council convened an emergency session aboard their mobile fortress, the Eternal Dominion, a ship so massive it had its own gravitational field. The 12 members of the council represented the pinnacle of Zephyrian evolution, ancient beings who'd lived for centuries and guided their species to galactic dominance through superior intellect and ruthless efficiency. Yet for the first time in their collective memory, they were afraid. Supreme Counselor Thex Moran, eldest of the 12, reviewed the intelligence reports with growing disbelief. In just 6 months, the human called Rex had destroyed or captured 47 Zephyrian installations, liberated over 200 worlds, and converted nearly 1,000 Imperial officers to his cause. More disturbing was the psychological impact his campaign was having on Zephyrian morale. Their warrior caste, bred for conquest and dominance, was beginning to question their fundamental superiority. "How is this possible?" demanded Counselor Vexera, her forearms gesturing in agitation. "One human with a small fleet should not be able to threaten an empire that spans 3 galaxy clusters. Our intelligence network suggests he has fewer than 10,000 ships, while we command millions." General Keth Morris, the Council's military advisor, projected tactical displays showing Marcus's recent victories. "The human doesn't fight like a member of a lesser species. He thinks like a pack hunter, using coordinated attacks and psychological warfare in ways our strategists never anticipated. Worse, he seems to understand our culture better than we understand his." The reports painted a disturbing picture. Marcus had begun recruiting not just aliens oppressed by the Zephyrian Empire, but Zephyrians themselves who'd become disillusioned with their society's cruelty. He offered them something their rigid hierarchy never could: the chance to grow beyond their predetermined roles and become something greater. His converted officers displayed loyalty that surpassed anything the Empire could inspire through fear or honor. But the most troubling aspect of Marcus's campaign was his use of rescued animals as psychological weapons. The sight of humans working alongside dogs, cats, and other Earth creatures had a profound impact on populations throughout the galaxy. These animals represented something that Zephyrian society had never developed: unconditional love and loyalty that transcended species boundaries. Worlds that had been neutral or even supportive of the Empire were beginning to question whether humanity might represent a better path forward. Supreme Counselor Thex Moran made the decision that would define the next phase of the conflict. "Deploy the Omega Fleet," he commanded his cliques and hisses carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. This human and his followers must be eliminated before their influence spreads further. The natural order must be preserved." The Omega Fleet was the Zephyrian Empire's ultimate weapon: 10,000 of their most advanced warships, each one capable of destroying entire star systems. It had been assembled over centuries as insurance against threats that might challenge Zephyrian supremacy. The fleet's commanders were the Empire's most skilled strategists, and its crews were fanatically loyal to the concept of Zephyrian superiority. Marcus learned of the fleet's deployment through his network of converted Zephyrian officers, many of whom still had contacts within the Imperial military hierarchy. The intelligence confirmed what he'd suspected: the Empire was finally taking his rebellion seriously enough to commit their full resources to stopping it. The coming battle would determine not just the fate of his coalition, but the future of every species in the galaxy. Standing in the command center of the former Genesis Project facility, now renamed Haven Station, Marcus studied the tactical projections with his senior staff. Hope, the old golden retriever he'd rescued, lay at his feet, her presence a calming influence amid the tension of preparing for the largest space battle in galactic history. Around the station, nearly 15,000 ships from dozens of different species prepared for a fight they might not survive. "They're bringing everything," reported Dr. Vasquez, who became Marcus's chief intelligence analyst. 10,000 ships, including 500 dreadnoughts and the Emperor's personal flagship. They're not planning to capture us. They want us completely destroyed. Kralthek, Marcus's converted Zephyrian advisor, clicked nervously as he reviewed the fleet compositions. The odds are impossible. Even with our technological advantages, we're outnumbered nearly 2-to-1 by ships that outclass most of our vessels. A direct engagement would be suicide. Marcus nodded, absently scratching Hope's ears as he considered their options. The old dog's presence reminded him of something important. Rex had never won fights through superior strength or size. He'd won through intelligence, loyalty, and the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect those he loved. The same principles that had made dogs humanity's perfect partners for 30,000 years would have to guide them now. "We're not going to fight them," Marcus announced, causing surprised murmurs throughout the command center. "We're going to show them something they've never seen before. The full power of what happens when different species choose cooperation over domination." The plan Marcus outlined was audacious beyond anything his staff had imagined. Instead of meeting the Omega fleet in conventional battle, they would use Haven Station as bait, allowing the Zephyrians to believe they were cornering their prey. Meanwhile, coalition forces would be positioned throughout the surrounding star systems, ready to demonstrate tactical coordination on a scale that had never been attempted in galactic warfare. But the real weapon wouldn't be ships or technology. It would be the rescued animals themselves, broadcast throughout the galaxy as living symbols of an alternative to the Zephyrian way of life. Every species that had been oppressed or threatened by the Empire would see that cooperation and compassion were not weaknesses to be exploited, but strengths that could overcome even the most overwhelming odds. The battle began exactly as Marcus had predicted. The Omega fleet arrived in perfect formation, their ships bristling with weapons designed to reduce Haven Station to cosmic dust. Supreme Admiral Zexcaler, commander of the Imperial forces, opened communications with a typical Zephyrian arrogance. Human called Rex. The Admiral's translated voice carried across all frequencies. "You have caused enough disruption to the natural order. Surrender now, and your death will be swift. Resist, and we will make your suffering legendary throughout the galaxy." Marcus responded by activating Haven Station's primary communication array, broadcasting not just to the Zephyrian fleet, but to every inhabited world in the sector. The transmission showed him standing in the station's main hall, surrounded by hundreds of rescued animals and representatives from dozens of species, all working together in perfect harmony. "I am Marcus Chun," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the void. "I represent the Coalition of the Forgotten, every species that has suffered under Zephyrian cruelty. We're here to offer you a choice. You can continue to live under a system that values dominance over cooperation, fear over trust, and cruelty over compassion, or you can join us in building something better." The transmission continued with footage from throughout Haven Station. Humans working alongside converted Zephyrians, rescued animals playing with children from a dozen different species, and Coalition scientists sharing technology that could improve life for everyone in the galaxy. It was everything the Zephyrian Empire opposed, and everything their subjects had been dreaming of for centuries. Admiral Zexcaler's response was predictably violent. The Omega fleet opened fire with enough concentrated energy to sterilize entire worlds, their weapons targeting not just Haven Station, but any Coalition ship within range. But Marcus was ready for them. At a signal, Coalition forces throughout the system activated a trap that had been months in the making. The rescued animals weren't just symbols or companions. They were the key to the most sophisticated military coordination system ever devised. Each dog, cat, and other Earth creature had been fitted with quantum communication devices that allowed instantaneous coordination between Coalition ships regardless of distance or sensor interference. The animals' natural pack hunting instincts, enhanced by technology and training, created a tactical network that operated faster than any artificial intelligence. What followed was less a battle than a demonstration of evolutionary warfare. Coalition ships moved with perfect coordination, their attacks precisely timed to exploit weaknesses in Zephyrian formations that only became apparent when viewed from dozens of perspectives simultaneously. The humans' animal partners provided tactical awareness that turned every coalition ship into part of a single, vast hunting pack. The Omega Fleet, despite their superior numbers and firepower, found themselves unable to respond effectively to attacks that seemed to anticipate their every move. Zephyrian commanders, trained to think in terms of hierarchical dominance, couldn't adapt to an enemy that operated through cooperative intelligence rather than centralized command. But the real shock came when entire Zephyrian ships began switching sides mid-battle. Marcus's psychological techniques have been spread throughout the coalition, and his converted officers have been quietly communicating with their former comrades throughout the engagement. Faced with clear evidence that cooperation was superior to dominance, hundreds of Zephyrian crews abandoned their posts and joined the coalition forces. By the time the battle ended, the Omega Fleet had been reduced to scattered remnants, and Admiral Zexkeller himself had surrendered his flagship to avoid further bloodshed. But, more importantly, the engagement had been broadcast throughout the galaxy, showing every inhabited world that the Zephyrian Empire was not invincible. As Marcus stood on Haven Station's observation deck, watching coalition ships rescue survivors from both sides of the battle, Hope pressed against his leg with the same gentle pressure Rex had used to comfort him during difficult times. The old dog looked up at him with eyes that reflected not just trust, but understanding of what they'd accomplished together. The war was far from over, but they'd proven something that would change the galaxy forever. When humans and their animal companions worked together with other species based on mutual respect rather than dominance, they became something greater than the sum of their parts. They became a force that no empire, no matter how powerful, could ultimately defeat. The age of Zephyrian dominance was ending, and the age of the Coalition was about to begin 2 years after the Battle of Haven Station. The galaxy was fundamentally transformed. The Zephyrian Empire, once the undisputed rulers of 3 galaxy clusters, had fragmented into dozens of smaller territories, many of which had voluntarily joined the Coalition of the Forgotten. The rigid hierarchy that had defined their civilization for millennia was crumbling as Zephyrians discovered the freedom that came from choosing cooperation over dominance. Marcus Chun stood in the Memorial Garden aboard the Coalition flagship Unity, a massive vessel built through the combined efforts of 47 different species. The garden was dedicated to all the creatures who died during the Zephyrian occupation, with a special section honoring the dogs and other Earth animals who'd suffered in the Empire's laboratories. At the center of the memorial stood a statue of Rex, carved from crystalline formations taken from the ruins of Marcus's first labor camp. Hope, now fully recovered from her injuries thanks to Coalition medical technology, sat beside Marcus as he read the daily reports from across the galaxy. At 97 in human years, she was ancient for a golden retriever, but Coalition biotechnology had extended her life and vitality far beyond natural limits. She'd become a living symbol of the bonds that held the Coalition together, and her gentle presence had helped heal the psychological wounds of thousands of rescued prisoners. The reports painted a picture of remarkable transformation. On former Zephyrian worlds, integrated communities were springing up where humans converted Zephyrians, and dozens of other species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. The psychological techniques Marcus had developed for converting Zephyrian officers had evolved into therapeutic methods that were helping entire populations overcome centuries of trauma and oppression. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now the Coalition's chief xenobiologist, entered the garden with her daily briefing. Despite her age, she moved with the energy of someone decades younger, her life extended and enhanced by alien technologies shared freely among Coalition species. Accompanying her was Kralthek, whose transformation from Imperial Naval Commander to Coalition Administrator represented the possibility of redemption even for former oppressors. The latest integration reports are encouraging, Dr. Vasquez reported, settling into one of the garden's meditation circles. The Kepler Collective has successfully established joint research stations with 12 former Zephyrian worlds, and the Technological Exchange Program is producing innovations none of our species could have achieved alone. Kralthek clicked approvingly as he reviewed the data. The psychological rehabilitation centers on former Imperial worlds are reporting unprecedented success rates. Zephyrians who've learned to value cooperation over dominance are becoming some of our most effective diplomats and mediators. The change in their brain chemistry is remarkable. But Marcus knew that not everyone in the galaxy was happy with the new order. Intelligence reports indicated that Supreme Counselor Thexmoran had retreated to the Zephyrian home system with the remnants of the Imperial fleet, declaring the coalition to be an aberration that threatened the natural order of the universe. Conservative factions throughout the galaxy were rallying to his banner, convinced that the old ways of dominance and hierarchy were humanity's true nature. The challenge facing the coalition wasn't military anymore. It was philosophical. They had to prove that cooperation and compassion weren't just temporary aberrations born of shared trauma, but sustainable alternatives to the systems that had dominated galactic civilization for millions of years. The proof would come not through conquest, but through demonstration of what was possible when different species chose to build something together. That demonstration was taking place on New Haven, a planet in the former neutral zone that had become the Coalition's capital world. The planet itself was a testament to what interspecies cooperation could achieve: floating cities that incorporated architectural principles from dozens of different cultures, agricultural systems that used technology from 17 different species to create sustainable abundance, and research facilities where the galaxy's greatest minds worked together on problems that had plagued civilization for millennia. But the most remarkable feature of New Haven was its animal populations. Dogs, cats, horses, and other Earth creatures lived alongside companion species from throughout the galaxy, creating an ecosystem of domestication and partnership that was unlike anything the universe had ever seen. The sight of Zephyrian children playing with puppies or elderly Kepler philosophers walking with therapy cats had become a symbol of hope that transcended species boundaries. Marcus made the decision to travel to New Haven for the Coalition's second anniversary celebration, bringing hope and a small delegation to witness what they'd helped create. The journey took them through star systems that had been battlefields just 2 years earlier, now bustling with trade ships and passenger liners carrying beings from across the galaxy who wanted to see the Coalition's achievements for themselves. The celebration on New Haven was unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives from over 300 species gathered in the planet's central plaza, sharing food, music, and stories that celebrated their differences while acknowledging their common bonds. Children who'd been born after the Coalition's formation played together without regard for species distinctions, their laughter echoing across the plaza as their parents watched with amazement and joy. Marcus found himself drawn to a small ceremony taking place in one corner of the plaza, where human children were participating in a Zephyrian coming-of-age ritual that had been adapted to celebrate cooperation rather than dominance. The young Zephyrians involved were members of the first generation to be raised with Coalition values, and their forearms moved in intricate patterns that told the story of their species' transformation from predators to partners. Watching the ceremony, Marcus reflected on how far they'd all come. The man who'd started this journey had been driven by grief and rage, seeking revenge for the murder of a faithful companion. But revenge had evolved into justice, justice into liberation, and liberation into something that might actually be worth the sacrifices they'd made. Hope pressed against his leg, her presence warm and reassuring as always. Looking down at her graying muzzle, Marcus realized that she'd become something Rex never could have been. Not just a companion, but a bridge between species and a living symbol of what was possible when beings chose love over fear. The final challenge came sooner than expected. Thexmoran's Imperial Remnant, bolstered by conservative factions from across the galaxy, launched what they called the Restoration War. a desperate attempt to reimpose the old order through superior firepower. Their fleet was smaller than the original Omega fleet, but it was crewed by fanatics who believed that the Coalition represented an existential threat to natural law itself. The decisive battle took place in the Tau Ceti system, where Marcus had first begun his journey of revenge. But this time, he wasn't fighting alone or even as the leader of a rebellion. The Coalition fleet that assembled to meet the Imperial Remnant represented the free choice of over 400 species, all of whom had decided that cooperation was worth defending. The battle itself was almost anticlimactic. The Imperial fleet's rigid tactical doctrine, unchanged after centuries of dominance, was no match for the fluid, adaptive strategies that had emerged from Coalition cooperation. More significantly, nearly half of Thexmoran's fleet defected during the engagement, their crews choosing freedom over fanaticism when faced with the choice. Thexmoran himself was captured when his flagship was boarded by a joint human-Zephyrian strike team led by former Imperial officers who'd found new purpose in the Coalition. Instead of execution or imprisonment, he was offered the same choice every other prisoner received, the opportunity to learn new ways of thinking and being, with the understanding that redemption was always possible for those willing to change. The old Supreme Counselor's transformation became the subject of countless studies and documentaries. Seeing the most rigid representative of Zephyrian hierarchy learn to work alongside humans and their animal companions proved that no being was beyond the reach of compassion and understanding. His eventual adoption of a rescue cat named Wisdom became one of the most widely shared stories in Coalition space. 5 years after the war's end, Marcus retired from active leadership of the Coalition, choosing to spend his remaining years in the Memorial Garden aboard Unity. Hope had passed away peacefully in her sleep, her final years filled with the love and respect of beings from across the galaxy. Her passing was mourned by billions, but her legacy lived on in the therapeutic programs and interspecies partnership initiatives that bore her name. Marcus's own legacy was more complex. History would remember him as the human who'd brought down the Zephyrian Empire and established the Coalition of the Forgotten. But those who knew him best understood that his greatest achievement was proving that love could be stronger than hatred, cooperation more powerful than domination, and that the bond between a human and their animal companion could change the course of galactic civilization. On quiet evenings in the Memorial Garden, Marcus would sit beside Rex's statue and remember the faithful German shepherd who'd started it all. Rex had died protecting the human he loved, never knowing that his sacrifice would inspire a movement that would transform the galaxy. In the end, perhaps that was the most human thing of all, the willingness to love so completely that even death couldn't break the bonds that held them together. The Coalition continued to grow and evolve, spreading throughout the galaxy and beyond as more species chose cooperation over conquest. They faced new challenges and made new discoveries, always guided by the principles that Marcus and his companions had established through their struggle against the Zephyrian Empire. The age of dominance was over, and the age of partnership had begun. And somewhere in the quantum foam that connected all living things, the spirit of a faithful dog named Rex continued to watch over the galaxy he'd helped save, his tail wagging with the joy of a job well done. Marcus Chun had always been a quiet man, the kind who preferred the company of his dog over most people. After losing his wife Sarah in the mining accident on Kepler Station 3 years ago, he'd retreated to the Outer Rim territories with only Rex, his faithful German shepherd Mix, as his companion. They made their living salvaging derelict spacecraft in the debris fields of the Tau Ceti system, where the Great War between humans and the Zephyrian Empire had left countless wrecks floating in the void. The salvage business wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Marcus would pilot his modified cargo hauler, the Sarah's Dream, through the twisted metal graveyards while Rex sat in the co-pilot's seat, his intelligent brown eyes watching the scanner displays as if he understood every blip and signal. In many ways, Rex was Marcus's early warning system. The dog had an uncanny ability to sense danger before the ship's sensors could detect it, often growling or whining minutes before pirates or automated defense systems would activate. On the morning everything changed, Marcus and Rex were investigating a partially intact Zephyrian battlecruiser that had been drifting for nearly a decade. The massive ship was a treasure trove of rare metals and advanced technology, the kind of find that could set them up for years. Rex had been unusually calm during the approach, his tail even wagging slightly as they docked with the alien vessel's cargo bay. The battlecruiser's corridors were dark and cold, filled with the metallic scent of long-dead atmosphere recyclers. Marcus wore his environmental suit while Rex padded alongside him in his specially designed canine space gear, complete with oxygen recycler and magnetic paws for zero-gravity movement. They developed a perfect system over the years. Rex would scout ahead, his enhanced senses detecting anything dangerous, while Marcus followed with the cutting tools and cargo haulers. They'd been working for 3 hours, carefully extracting valuable components from the ship's engineering section, when Rex suddenly stopped and growled low in his throat. His hackles rose beneath his suit, and he backed toward Marcus, pressing against his leg in a way that meant immediate danger. Marcus checked his scanner, but it showed nothing unusual. Then he heard it too, the subtle vibration through the deck plating that meant engines were powering up. The Zephyrian patrol ship materialized out of stealth mode, just as Marcus and Rex reached their airlock. It was sleek and predatory, painted in the deep purple and silver of the Zephyrian Navy. Through his helmet radio, Marcus heard the cold, electronically modulated voice that had haunted human nightmares for decades. Human vessel, this is Commander Vexhai of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. You are illegally salvaging in a protected war memorial site. Prepare to be boarded for inspection and judgment. Marcus's hands moved automatically to his ship's controls, but he knew it was pointless. The Zephyrians had faster ships, better weapons, and absolutely no regard for human life. During the war, they'd been known to execute entire crews for minor infractions, claiming it was necessary to maintain order among the lesser species. The ceasefire had been in effect for 5 years now, but encounters like this proved it was fragile at best. The boarding tube connected with a metallic clang that resonated through the Sarah's Dreams hull. Marcus sealed Rex in the emergency shelter he'd built behind the engine room, a hidden compartment that would protect his companion from radiation or decompression. Rex whined and scratched at the door, sensing his human's fear, but Marcus had no choice. The Zephyrians considered most Earth animals to be vermin, and Rex would be killed on sight if they discovered him. "Stay quiet, boy," Marcus whispered through the shelter's comm system. "I'll be back for you. I promise." 3 Zephyrians entered his ship, their elongated forms moving with predatory grace. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and chitinous purple-black skin that seemed to absorb light. Their faces were angular and cruel, with large black eyes that reflected no mercy or compassion. Commander Vexhai wore the silver insignia of his rank, while his 2 subordinates carried energy weapons that could vaporize a human in seconds. "You were warned about salvaging in memorial sites," Vexhai said, his translator rendering his clicks and hisses into cold English. "The penalty for desecration of Zephyrian war graves is severe." Marcus tried to explain that the battlecruiser had been listed as abandoned salvage in the neutral zone treaties, but the aliens weren't interested in his legal arguments. They'd clearly decided his fate before boarding. What followed was a systematic looting of everything valuable on his ship: his tools, his credits, his personal belongings, even Sarah's wedding ring that he wore on a chain around his neck. Then, one of the subordinates detected something with his scanner and chittered excitedly to the commander. Vexhai's large eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. "Life sign. Mammalian. You're harboring vermin. Human." Marcus's blood turned to ice. "It's just my dog. He's harmless, completely domesticated. Please, he's all I have left." But the Zephyrians were already moving toward the engine room, following their scanners to the hidden shelter. Marcus lunged forward desperately, only to be stunned by an energy weapon that sent paralyzing electricity through his nervous system. He collapsed to the deck, helpless, as they found Rex's hiding place. Rex had been trained never to attack unless Marcus gave the command, but when the aliens dragged his human's unconscious body toward their ship, something primal awakened in the dog's genetic memory. He launched himself at the nearest Zephyrian with a snarl that echoed through the corridors, his teeth finding the soft joint between the alien's neck and shoulder. The creature screamed and dropped its weapon, purple blood spraying across the deck. The other Zephyrian shot Rex without hesitation. The energy beam caught him mid-leap, and he crashed to the floor with a pitiful whine. Marcus, still paralyzed, but conscious, could only watch as his best friend struggled to breathe, his brown eyes finding his human's face one last time before the light faded from them. "Disgusting creature," Vexhai said, crushing Rex's body under his boot. "At least it died with some spirit. More than most of your species can claim." They dragged Marcus to their ship and threw him into a detention cell barely large enough for a human to stand upright. Through the small viewport, he watched as they set charges on the Sarah's Dream and destroyed it, along with Rex's body. The explosion lit up the dark space around the Zephyrian battlecruiser like a brief, tragic star. As the patrol ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying him toward an uncertain fate in Zephyrian space, Marcus Chun felt something die inside him that wasn't just grief. The quiet man who'd preferred solitude and simple work was gone, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. They'd taken everything from him twice now. First Sarah, now Rex. There was nothing left to lose, which meant there was nothing to hold him back from what he was going to do. In the months that followed, Marcus would escape from the labor camp on Zephyria Prime. He would steal weapons and ships, gather allies and intelligence, and begin a campaign of revenge that would shake the foundations of the Zephyrian Empire. But in that moment, sitting in the dark cell with his hands still smelling like Rex's fur, he simply sat and planned. The Zephyrians had made a fatal mistake in underestimating both human determination and the bond between a man and his dog. They'd killed Rex thinking he was just an animal, not understanding that dogs have been humanity's partners for over 30,000 years. They were part of what made humans dangerous, loyal, brave, and utterly devoted to those they loved. By destroying that bond, the Zephyrians hadn't just murdered a pet. They declared war on everything that made humanity worth preserving. And Marcus Chun was going to make them pay for every second of Rex's suffering.